Well, hello. Welcome to another lesson in the free web development bootcamp. It's great to see you all. Folks are saying good morning. Good morning, Nikita. Good morning, Mike. Good evening good evening, Mike. I can't read. Sorry. It's evening here as well. Hope everyone's doing wonderful. Um, if you're tuning in for the first time, hi, my friend Jess and I are running this series of free boot camps. We're recording all of this on YouTube. So if you go to youtube.com/@bad website club, you'll find all of the previous lessons. Um, please follow our code of conduct when you attend these streams. Remember, we're all in this to learn together, and we just want to make sure that everyone's comfortable and happy. So please, if you see anything out of source, let us know. You can join us on Discord. Let me get that Discord channel for us. And you'll also find information such as the schedule all on our website over here. Hello, Andre. There's all the information, including the Discord invite if you want to join in. But that's all of my blabbering. It's gonna be just me today. Jess is gonna be back on Tuesday. She's just got some stuff going on. Everything's fine. Just got to take care of a couple things. But until then, let's carry on with today. Today, we're going to be doing a part 2 to yesterday's lesson. So if you missed yesterday's lesson, don't worry. You're just in time because everything is recorded. Okay, well, let's hop right into CSS Grid. So this is where we left off yesterday. We were building a magazine using CSS Grid, and we declared our first CSS grid here. Now, where we left off is that we declared a template for our grid in columns, splitting them into 3 columns, one being 1 fraction big, the other one being 94 rem big, and the other one being 1 fraction big. So if we take a look at our preview here, we're going to see, cool, there's one column, it's 1 fraction big. Then there's the next one, which is 94 rem, and the last one, which is 1 fraction. They differ in sizes because of the images, but we'll fix that in the future. The important part here is we've got a grid with 3 columns. Each column is 1 section. Section element, that is. So that's step 33. Now we'll go into step 34. I'm just going to drop a link to that if folks are interested in joining in. Remember, whoa, my camera's kind of high up today. Sorry about that. Remember, if you've got any questions, please interrupt me. If there's anything that requires a larger discussion, we'll do it at the end of the lesson. Okay, well, let's keep doing some CSS Grid. So we're going to be using this min-max function to make our grids responsive on any device. And when we talk about responsive here, it's just like the other instances of responsiveness that we've done in, for example, using media queries and this sort of thing, or max height, max width, and so on and so forth, where we're saying, hey, we want to make this website look as good as possible on as many devices as possible. And I think that's going to start with my preview here because, yeah, this isn't very responsive. You see, you have to scroll to the right a lot. And usually you don't have to scroll to the left or the right on your websites. So what we're going to be doing is using the min-max function with 2 arguments, one being the minimum value that we expect a column to be, and the second being the maximum. So, and these values can take any kind of measurement. They can be a length, a percentage, a fraction, or even a keyword like max content. We haven't gotten there yet. So we're going to wrap each of our already defined values in a min-max function using each value as a second argument. Remember, sorry, I hit my microphone. That's the second argument. You'll see what I mean in just a minute. The first argument should be 2 rem min content and 2 rem respectively. Let's give it a try. Let's start with the first one, just step by step. So the first column, which remember is this one here, should be min-max. Let's just wrap that in some brackets. So right now that min-max only has 1 argument, but we want to have it take 2 arguments. So we want the minimum to be 2 rem and the maximum to be 1 fr. So it's a function, so it takes 2 arguments. And remember, when we use functions in CSS, we need to separate those with a comma. So min-max 2 REM and 1 RFR, and oh my goodness, that's a choice. I'm sure we're going to fix it in a bit. Let's do the next one real quick. So same thing, min-max. We'll wrap that 94 REM in brackets. And the first argument for this one should be min content. So, okay, that's looking a little bit less gnarly, which is good. Then we've got our third argument here, our third column here, where we'll also give it a min-max. Wrap that in brackets and have these be 2 REM. Forgot a comma. Oh, that's why it looked kind of weird. There we go. Cool. So now we've got, let's open this up again. Now we've got 3 columns. Now notice what's happening. The middle column is staying in the middle, and the side-by-side columns are staying off to the sides. But this still doesn't look quite right. The reason we have so much space here to the right, can anybody guess? While we do that, let's take a look at what else is going on here. So this column is minimum 2 REM. Remember, our 2 REM here is 20 pixels, which if you notice, yeah, that's kind of 20 pixels. So it has to be at least 20 pixels or a maximum of 1 fraction. Let's look at this one, though. Here we've got min content and 94 REM. So it needs to be at least big enough as the minimum required for the content. So if I keep squeezing and squeezing and squeezing, at some point it's going to say, okay, that's as far as the content can be squeezed. So min content here stands for at least enough space to display, for example, 1 word. Free Code Camp, I think, is the one squeezing it. We'll confirm this at the end and when we look into what is min content. But yeah. Now let's look at this third one. We've got brief history. So it needs to be at least 20 pixels or 1 FR. You can see it is squeezed down pretty far. But what's going on here? Why do we have so much space off to the sides? And here's the answer. So even though the columns are being respected, the images are like, hey, I'm 400 pixels and there's nothing you can do about it. Remember, we set the width of these images in our HTML, not in our CSS. Here, I'll show you. Let's go over here. Scroll down. We put so much content yesterday. There it is. Oh, never mind. 600 pixels. Now, usually we're going to be doing this in our CSS with the image width and height. But for now, I think this looks good. Let's see if Free Code Camp agrees, which it does. So we'll keep moving. Amazing. So now we're going to be using space between rows. So we're going to be using the row gap property to say, hey, between each row of our grid, give it about 3 REM. Well, that doesn't seem to have made much of a difference. And you're right. There's not much of a difference. That's because we're giving it a row gap. But I wonder, does it look good? Yeah. That would be really helpful if we had rows. This is a grid of columns. Oh, so if you see this pop up, just note this bootcamp's free. Free Code Camp, which runs separately, is also free, but they depend, of course, on donations. So if you can give them a couple bucks a month. I'm doing this on a separate account, so I'm going to click on Ask Me Later here. With more my streaming account. So our magazine will have 3 primary sections. I already set the overall layout in the main rule, but I can adjust the placement of the child rules. Here we go. Grid column property, which is shorthand for grid column start and grid column end. Or the grid column property, the grid column property tells the grid item which grid line to start and end that. What? Let's try this out. So for our heading, let's look at our heading again. It's been a while. our heading. Which one's our heading? So we have a section called heading. That's the class heading. So we're going to tell the heading, hey, have a grid column layout of 2/3. Cool. Well, this seems to have done a whole bunch of stuff. What's going on is we're telling the heading, which remember is the first part of the grid, to start at the grid line 2 and end at the grid line 3. So now it looks like it's taking up a whole bunch of space, and I'm going to show you all using the inspector to see what's going on. So, but let's see what else is going on. This is now pretty narrow. This is the main content, though. What's going on down here? What happens if I scroll down a whole lot? Oh! There's our aside, our third section. So what's going on with our layout? Tell you what. Let's bring up that inspector so we can inspect our grid. You know what? I think you're going to like what you see here. So let me bring up our main, which is a grid. And this is what's pretty cool about browsers. You can actually take a look at what these grids look like. You can, for example, show the line numbers, show the track sizes, show area names. You're going to see what happens when I hover over it. It's a bit hard to see on stream. Oh gosh, I really hope you can see it. But there's a line around our sections. How could I show you all this? What happens if I click here? Oops. That shows the preview on a different page, and I did not want to do that. Can I maybe merge that in here? Nope, bear with me, folks. I'm very sorry. Let me try that again. So there's our curriculum. Let's bring it back up. Show our main grid again. Now, if you have a look, you're going to see an outline, a pink outline around each grid section. You see where it says our new curriculum? There's like a vertical pink line running along it. And then at the very end, there's another one running along it. That's showing us the sizes of the grids. Oops. Oh, here we go. Perfect. So check it out. You see this line here? It's a bit difficult to see, but there you can see this is column 2, and this here at the end is column 3. So let's go all the way back here. Just to remind you, we told, hey, heading, I want you to start at grid 2 and at column 2 and end at column 3. So what happened? We've told our curriculum section, start here at the second column and end here just before the third column. So what we've done is we've moved that first column into the second one. Every other element of that grid will just move one column over. So this one is now in the third column and is very narrow. But okay, our grid only has 3 columns. What happens if there are more? And that's what happened to the next section. It went, well, if we scroll all the way down, here, to the second row. This is very confusing at first. We're going to cover it again once it looks a little bit cleaner. But in short, what we've done is say, hey, put this column in the second place, move this one to the third one, and the one that's in the third one will go all the way to the next row. And we'll cover this again and again. So don't worry if it hasn't immediately clicked yet. Let's keep going for now. So we're going to create a, Sean says, I thought Flex was tricky. Yeah, this one's weird, but trust me, we'll get there. So now we're going to create a text selector and give it a grid column property set to 2/3. Okay, let's go look at what text was again, because it's been a while. So let's go look for that element with class text. Scroll down. It's the second section. So right now, remember that second section is here. So we want to take that section and give it that grid column property set to 2/3. Oh, sorry, I forgot my. Now, would you look at that? Now, well, that looks significantly nicer, doesn't it? So what happened? We moved our text, the second section, into the second column. But you might be thinking, hold on, there's already something in the second column, which there is. So what the grid did was say, cool, we'll just move it to the next row into the second column. I'm so sorry. Let's inspect again so we can see what's going on. Inspect that grid. Let's look at the layout. Show this nicely. What does this do? Ah, cool. Oh, this looks so much better. Check it out. Oh, it looks we have all this labels now. So here's our grid, right? We have one column here on the left, second column here, third column here. Yeah? So we moved our, hold on, our heading into the second column. Then we told the text section, oopsie, our text section to also be in the second column. But I moved it to the next row. Makes sense. But what about this space? That is where a row gap came in. So we told our grid, hey, if there is a second row, it needs to have 3 rem between that and the first one. So cool. We've got our text. What's going on here? Well, would you look at that? This one is also in the next row and accordingly has a gap. But you might be wondering, well, hold on, we didn't tell this one where to go, which is a fair point. However, let's go back to our HTML and look. The second and third sections both had the text class. So we've essentially told every single section to have it to be in the second column. And what we've done with that is create this layout. Now you're thinking, hold on, this looks too much like Flexbox. It kind of does. But look at how much more control we have over the size. Remember all that wonky min-max stuff we did? That let us have really fine-tuned control over how this should adapt with size, which, hold on, still not responsive. I bet we know why. It's those dang images. And I bet we're going to fix that in a minute too. So don't worry, we'll get there. Let's keep going. Sorry about that. And here we go. Now we're going to have a grid inside our grid. What? You'll see. This will allow us to have even more fine-tuned control over our layout. So we're going to set inside our heading, which is this column up here, set display to grid. Doesn't do anything yet. Makes sense. We've just told it, hey, you're a grid now. And it's like, okay, if you say so. But. If we go back to the inspector, look at layout again, and display the grid in the heading. Look at this. Look at this. You're going to love it. Hold on. Let's bring on the main one as well. You're going to see we now have 2 grids. One is for the main, that's the more yellow one, and the other one's for the heading, that's this one here. So, okay, there's a lot going on. So why do we want to be able to have a grid inside a grid? How's that going to help us? We're going to make it so that we can have, I said, more fine-tuned control over the inside of our heading. So we're going to, for example, create it so that it has two columns, each being one fraction large. So the grid template columns. Now, one way we could do this is by typing 1FR, 1FR. That is entirely valid. Wait, where'd it go? Well, it's over here now. So each of these are one fraction big. Still having some trouble with that image, but I bet we're going to fix that in a minute. So we could have 1FR, but what if we wanted to have three columns? Well, we could just type 1FR, 1FR, 1FR. Now we've got three columns. What if we wanted to have four? 1FR, 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 1FR. This becomes cumbersome to write if you want them each to have one fraction. So what we can do here is use the function repeat. It takes two arguments. One is the number of times you want to repeat. So for example, 2. And then what that thing we want to repeat is, fraction. So repeat to one fraction is the same as typing 1FR twice, which doesn't sound really helpful when you just got 2. But when you want to have something like 20, this becomes much easier to write. So there we go. Grid with two columns. Let's keep going. Can't wait for those images to become easier to manage. Cool. Then we need to set our row gap to be 1.5 rem. Now hold on a minute. How do we get that gap? Let's go have a look. In our heading, where's our heading? Did I go too far? I went too far. Actually, why am I doing this here when I can do it in the inspector? I don't know. It feels nicer to show stuff in the inspector. Check it out. In our heading, remember, each element inside the heading is going to be one column. And we have 3 elements in our heading. Make some more space here. Sorry, it's kind of tricky to work with when we have to have a limited space. So the first one's the image. The second one is the H1. And the one after that is our hero subtitle. Image source, H1, hero subtitle. So where's our author? I thought our author should be here. Our new curriculum. Friends, I'm silly. I'm sorry. This is the grid, the heading, not the header. See, I got confused. This is why you got to be very, very careful with your class names. So our heading is a grid. There are 3 elements inside it: the hero itself, the author, and the social buttons, which are further down. So hero, author, social buttons. You see the tricky part? We only have 2 columns in our grid. So for social icons, it's like, well, there's only 2 columns. Social icons, you go to the next row. And that's why we have this row gap. All right. So element number 1, element number 2, element number 3. And there we can see the spacing. Whew. Let's keep going. Great. Now we're going to again use grid column to specifically say which column our elements should go into. But what if we want to have an element stop at the last column? We can use -1 as a position for that. You're going to see what I mean in just a minute. So for the hero, which remember is this part here, we want it to be at the last column. So it's going to let's go to our hero. So we want it to grid column. We want this one to start at the first column and end at the last one. This means that, and you're going to see this in a minute, it's going to start at column 1 and end after column 2. So now the hero takes up the full width of the grid. Wait, what? You'll see what I mean. So let's inspect once again. Y'all are so patient with me. So, hero, nice and big. Author, oh, let's scroll a little bit down. Author's down here now in the second row. It's in the second row because the first row is already full. And here's the social icons. Yeah? Let's look at that layout again. I bet we're going to see some interesting stuff here. So if we show everything and look at our heading, check it out. This is our grid. It's got 2 columns. Now our hero, which is comprised of these elements here, start at the beginning and end at the end. Then we have a new row. We have a gap. And then here's our author section and our social icons. This is what's powerful about grid. You can be really precise about how to lay it out, which is something you can't do with Flexbox as easily, believe it or not. Yeah? So, full width and then next row. Hope y'all are still with me. It's a lot. Let's keep going. Remember, not all of this has to click immediately. Now we're going to give our hero a position set to relative. Is anything going to change? No. But now if we do put absolute stuff in here, it's going to be able to float relative to that relative point. Cool. Let's keep going. We're still awake and with you. Very good. Thank you. Oh, it's happening. We're finally starting to remove these temporary widths. So let's start with this one. Watch what happens. Oh no. So now it's using the native width and height of our image. And it's a big image. So it's going to look like a bit of a mess, but don't worry. I bet we're going to fix that with CSS now. So in order to do that, we're going to use CSS on the IMG or image selector. And we're going to use width set to be 100%. So now it's going to be like, hey, please be only as wide as your container. Then we're going to use object fit to cover. Didn't change much. But if this image were bigger, the object fit cover would crop it strategically just so that it stays the same aspect ratio or the size that's needed here. Looks good. Making progress. I don't know if you'd noticed, by the way. Look at it now. Now it grows, which is pretty cool. And we can't scroll to the left and right anymore because all of our images are targeted with this now. Check it out. But of course, some images still are bigger, so they're being cropped or cut. But we'll fix that in a minute. Oh, Nikita, I like your question. I'm going to save it for the end. All right, let's keep going. We're doing great. So now we're going to go to our hero title selector and use text align for center. So that's going to move it over to the center, which is great. And we're going to change its font size to be 8 REM. Hold on. Remember that REM is relative to the default or base font size. You might remember we changed that font size to be 62.8% or something. So 8 times 10 pixels is going to make this 80 pixels big. Very large. That is very, very large. But it's looking more magazine-like now, which is pretty cool. Oh, hold on. What did I do? Oh, I forgot the color. Orange, red. My brain wants to read this as orangered. But hey, there we go. So, I like the comments in here. I'm going to come back and discuss them too. So the subtitle still needs to be changed. So, hero subtitle, set this to be font size of 2.4 REM. Color is also orangered. And align set to center. Now you see this is starting to look a lot more magazine-like. I like where this is going. Cool. Next, we'll do the author section. Author font size is 2 REM. Font family is Railway with a fallback of sans serif. Cool. It's very large. Look at this. So now we're going to give this is a link. Remember yesterday, Jess and I were saying like, I don't like this very much because it's not very accessible. So we're going to target links when they're hovered using this pseudo selector inside an author name. I'm going to give it a background, color of 306203. So let's see how that looks. Ooh. I'd still prefer to have it be underlined so that I know when reading that it's clickable, you know? All right, let's keep going. So we got our publish date. Publish date selector. And the color is going to be RGB A. Remember the A? That's for the alpha channel, or how transparent it how opaque it should be, how not see-through it is. So if we set this to be 255, 255, 255, that's going to make it white. You see it's already lighter. However, we're also going to set this opacity. So it's from 0 to 1. So the bigger the number, the more opaque it is, the less transparent it is. For example, if I make it 0.75, you're going to see it's lighter. 85, even lighter. 95, even lighter. Likewise, if I go all the way to 0, it's not black because it's fully transparent. The text is still there. Check this out. Just can't see it. But now it's half transparent. Cool. Looks distinct now, which is nice. And we're going to do the social icons, which is good. Oh, we're going to do them in a grid. Exciting. So, social icons, display is set to grid. Your font size is 3 rem. Perfect. Alrighty, let's keep going. By the way, they're all stacked on top of each other. That's because we haven't set up a layout yet for our grid. I bet we're going to do that next. Yep. So we're going to have these be 5 times 1 FR. Cool. Grid, template, columns. Repeat, 5, 1 FR. Oops. I believe, by the way, that Flexbox came before grid. Hey, check it out. Now they're all next to each other. Kind of weird that the Facebook one is bigger than the rest. I wonder why that is. If you ever have if you're ever curious about something like that, you can always be like, oh, huh. Let's inspect. So yeah, that's because of the sizing of the grid. Here it's starting to squash them already, but the F still has a little bit more space. Cool. Let's keep going. So if I wanted to now add more social icons, I can add them, but they would appear in the next row, which is what we expect from making a grid. If we want to change that, all we can do is make this more or less. But we can also use the grid auto flow property. So this will take a row or column as the first value with an optionate second value of dense. And this is going to automatically adjust our grid layout. You're going to see what I mean in just a minute. So if we set it to be a column, it's going to automatically make it work so that all of the icons fit in one row. You'll see what I mean. It's pretty cool actually. So let's set this grid auto flow to be column. They're probably wondering like, well, that didn't make a difference. That's true. It looks good, in fact. And you'll see why this is powerful in just a minute. Now, if we wanted to add more icons, if we wanted to add more icons, this auto placement will kick in. But it'll set its width to be auto, which will not match our current icons. Right? You'll see what I mean when I add a new one. So here we've got our 5 social icons. And I'll tell you what, let's go over here and just copy paste and add another one. Notice that the LinkedIn is kind of squashed in there. That's because its sizing as set is set to auto as opposed to 1FR. Because when we made our template, we said, well, they all have to be 1FR for 5. So what we can do is set this grid auto columns to be 1FR. So when we automatically make new columns, each of them will be 1FR wide. Looks good so far. But there's one part I bet we're going to remove. Well, I want to remove it anyway. We'll probably remove it later, but I still want to show you all. Nothing changed. Now that we have set this set to be, please make it be one row. So like make it automatically flow into columns and make each of those columns 1FR wide. It makes that layout automatically for us. I'm going to restore that line of code so that Free Code Camp is happy. But here's the other fun part. Just like in Flexbox, you can have align items and justify items. The way it works is align items will align them along the column axis, and justify items will align child elements along the row axis. It's a little bit different to Flexbox, so be careful with this difference. So let's align our items to be at the center. Did you see that? Check it out. First was at the top. Now they're aligned in the center of the column. Grid is amazing. Yeah, it is. It's so powerful. There we go. Good so far. Okay, cool. We're going to continue styling our magazine. So let's keep going. So our text selector, remember that's each of the text sections of our magazine. Let's scroll down a little bit here so we can see. That's this here. We're going to set the font size to be 1.8 rem, bigger. And the letter spacing is going to be 0.6 pixels. That's just giving a little bit more space between each letter. Makes it look more magazine-y. I believe that's the technical term. Cool. Nice big text. Looks good so far. Let's keep going. Now, we can create columns within an element without using grid by using the column width property. Now, bear in mind, this applies to our text. So when we have lots of paragraphs of text, what we can use here is the column width property and set it to be 25 rem. You're probably wondering, like, hold on, that didn't do anything. True. Watch what happens when I expand a little bit. Now there's 2 columns of text. What if I have a third one? I hope I can. Ah, there we go. That way, we can divide our text into several columns. Amazing. So, the last thing to do here is we're going to be using justified text like we do in magazines. This does work fine in printed form. Justified text on websites can be an accessibility concern. For example, presenting challenges for folks with dyslexia. But let's make this look like a magazine. So we're going to use text align. Watch what happens to the text to justify. Did you see the difference? Let's do it again. How it is before. What it does is it stretches all of the words in that line, the spaces between the words, I should say, so that they take up the full width of that line. And you see, this does look a little bit more, again, using that technical term, magazine-y. But yeah, expanding, that kind of gives me a headache. So I'm not going to mess around with that too much. Sorry about that. But there we go. We're going to be using a pseudo selector. So in our first paragraph, we're going to target the pseudo selector first letter. So no matter what the text we have in here is, we're going to take that first letter and do the following things to it. Font size set to 6 rem. Look at that, super big. And we're going to set the color property to be orange red. Now look at how magazine-y that looks. That's pretty cool. Let's keep going. So the other text has been shifted out of place. So we're going to move it into position using giving this a float left property. Watch what happens. Ah, let's do it again. So here it kind of shifted all of the text down. And what we wanted to do with float left was tell it like, hey, everything flow around it. It's pretty cool. It's incredible how few properties make everything look so good. Yeah, like CSS is so powerful. So we'll do a margin right of 1 rem. Look at that. I don't want to sound bad when I say this, but it looks so professional. Cool. Next up, excuse me, we're going to go to our HRs. Remember, we had those HRs in here. We're going to give each of them a margin property of 1.5 rem, vertical, and 0 rem horizontal. Done. Now the HRs have a little bit more space between them, and that looks quite nice. Cool. Let's keep going. Still plenty of grid stuff to do. Oh, there we go. Let's go back here. So we're going to give it a color using the border property. Going to be 1 pixel big. It'll be solid. That color will be RGBA. Remember, it's going to have some opacity or how not see-through. Opacity is the opposite of transparency. The more opaque, the less transparent. I'm going to set that to be 0.6. Yeah, very, very classic, classy colors. Nice. All done. Let's keep going. So now we're going to style our quotes. Remember, that's these block quotes elements here. Quote. The color is, I'm sorry, it's 00 BE and then EF. Okay, so it turns out 00 beef gives us this actually quite pleasant blue. Font size is going to be 2.4 rem. A little bigger, nice. And the text align is going to be center. Very fancy. Cool. Let's go back to our quote. I don't think you can make it 00 chicken, I'm afraid. Right. Our quote, we're going to change the font family to be Railway with a fallback of comma sans serif. Very fancy. Looking good. What's next? Yes. I actually learned this and I put it on my website from Free Code Camp. So we're going to use pseudo elements to put in quote marks around our quotations. It's going to be super cool. You'll see what I mean. So in quote, we're going to use the before pseudo selector. Remember, for that before element, set the content property to be a quote mark. Look at that. Now, this we need to be careful with. Notice I put single quote, double quote, single quote. Why did I do that? Why didn't I put double quote, double quote, double quote? This is because CSS needs to understand where the string begins and ends. So it begins here, and we might think it ends here, but this is how CSS is reading it. CSS is going like, oh, a string, cool, let's start. Oh, it ended. There was nothing in it. All right, cool. Why is this here? Right? This is tricky. So we have two ways of approaching this. One is with using single quotes, which you can totally do, and then put it in there. That works. Nice. Or you can use a backslash, I think. Yes. You can use a backslash to say like, quote mark. And then with this backslash, we're saying like, hey, whatever the next character is, it's not what you think it is. Just display it. This is called escaping. And we're going to see more of that when we learn JavaScript next. Oh gosh, in 2 weeks. Wow, time flies. So yeah, whatever the next character is, just display it. And then CSS is like, oh, okay, cool. I'll display a quote mark, no problem. Oh, and the string ends here. So this is one way to do it. Or the other way is with single quote marks and then a double quote mark. Because then it goes, okay, cool, a string starting. All right, double quote mark. Well, I started with a single quote mark, so I'm good. Oh, cool, single quote mark, string's over. And look at me not reading the instructions properly. Set the content to a space with a space following it. There we go. Then we need to do this. Oops, sorry. Then we need to do the same for the quote after selector. And we'll set the content to be a quote mark with a space preceding, that is before it. Let's give that a try. Content, space, quote mark. There we go. Nice. Looks good. Let's keep going. Now we're going to style our third section. So let's scroll all the way down here. Here we go. Oh, sorry. It's up here. Here we go. So if you remember, that one has a text class, but also a text with images class. So it's already inheriting a bunch of stuff here, including that column width, as well as the justification of text. So what we're going to do here is style our text with images, and we're going to have it be a grid. Okay, but didn't do anything. Something wrong? No, we just said it's a grid. Now we need to create the layout for that grid. So I'm going to use the grid template. Whoop. Columns property to be 1FR and 2FR. Okay, let's go have a look at it. Ah, I see. So this one's 1 fraction, and this one's 2 fractions big. Yeah, so this one's, whatever the size of our grid, the second column will be twice as wide as the first one. Check it out. But they're kind of smushed together, so we're going to use the column gap property to be 3 rem wide. See? Now we've got a bit of space between them, which is quite handy. Cool. That's our grid inside a grid. Nice. Let's keep going. All the way here at the bottom, at the very bottom, we're going to give a margin bottom of 3 rem. Watch how it bounces up a little. There we go. Nice. Nothing super huge, but hey, we're taking steps. Scroll down again. This is a bit of an annoying thing, and I'm very sorry, but I have to scroll down every time we do a new step. So we're going to go to our lists, and the list style type we're going to set to none, which, if you remember, did you see that? It removed the bullet marks. Watch. Take it back. There's a bullet point. Cancel. There it's gone. Doesn't look like much of a list anymore. But hey, it passes, and I bet we're going to do something about it. Maybe. Scroll all the way down again. Sorry about this. Here we go. So our list is going to have a margin top of 2 rem. There we go. Move the list down. Nice. Let's keep going. Now we're going to still that list li. So for each list item inside our lists, oh yeah, we're going to give them a bottom margin so that there's a little bit more space between them. 1.5 rem. Oh, that's very chill. Looks good. And you know what I'm doing? I'm going to scroll all the way down here. And for our list title and our list subtitle, sorry, I made a typo there. I'm going to set the color property to be 00 beef. It's that blue color again. Yeah. Looks good. There's our title and our subtitles. Looks good. And now we're going to style the last section of our magazine, which is the images. Oh, I'm excited about this. So the images are wrapped in it as in an aside element with the image wrapper class. We're going to use grid. So image wrapper is going to be a grid now. If I could spell that, there we go. Grid. Nothing changes. That's okay. We'll come back to it. Nice. Scroll all the way. I got to do this every step now. Cool. I'm going to use grid template columns to be 2 FR and 1 FR. And we're going to use grid template rows to be repeating 3 times min content. Let's expand. Oh, hello. So let's take a minute to analyze what's going on here. First, let's look at our CSS. We're saying, hey, this grid has 2 columns. The first one is twice as long, and the first one is 1 fraction as the second one. So this first column is twice as wide as the second column. I'm going to say that one more time because I keep confusing myself. The first column is twice as wide as the second one. Cool. We're also saying, hey, there are 3 rows in our grid, each of which is as tall as it needs to be to accommodate the content. But there's only 2 rows, and that's because there's only 4 elements in this grid. Let me, bear with me, please. Let's inspect this real quick, because I bet y'all want to inspect it, and I do too. So here's our image wrapper. Remember, it's a grid. Very cool. Let's highlight the lines on this grid. Where is it? Text with images, image wrapper. Perfect. Great. Cool. So there's our image wrapper. It's got 4 elements inside it. One is an image here. It's in the first column, which remember is twice as wide as the second one, which we see here. There's our second image in the second column, so it's being squished to be only 1 fraction wide. Then we start our second row, which is our quote. Because it's in the first column, it's twice as wide as the image after that. But there's nothing else inside that, so it's only 2 rows. 4 elements in a grid. Cool. Let's check our code. Looks good. Let's keep going. I think we're running out of time. Big Shark says hello. Hello. We're just wrapping up, I'm afraid, because I'm going to do one more exercise of these. We're doing CSS grid, which is very exciting. Okay. So we can use gap to set both the column gap and the row gap. If it's given 1 value, it sets both of them to be the same. If we do 2 values, it says the row gap first and the column gap after that. How are we doing? We're doing good. Thank you. We're learning some CSS grid, which is one of my favorite topics. Cool. Here we go. Oh, I can't see much of it. Oh, look what happens as I expand it. Whoop. So set our gap property to be 2 rem. So watch what happens. It added 2 rems of gap between each column and between each row. And with that, we're done. I will do this one, and then we'll do some questions, and then we'll go get some rest. So we're going to be using the place item property to set both the align items and justify items at the same time. So if we use place items, that sets both align items and justify items to center. Let's go take a look. And there we go. Doesn't make a huge difference just yet, but I bet it's going to look more interesting once we've got more of an interesting layout to go. However, that is going to be for you to find out because I'm going to stop here for today. Um, y'all have been super patient to bear with me through learning grid. It is a lot, but I want to take some time to answer some questions. So if you've got questions, please ask them now. In the meantime, let's discuss homework. So we're at step 76 here. And I'm sorry, I'm going to be a little bit mean because there's still 5 more steps to do. So your homework for either tomorrow or whenever you have time, remember this is self-paced, so there's no rush, is going to be to do these 5 steps. Yeah? Is to finish the CSS Grid magazine exercise. Yeah? Cool. Let's do some questions. Checkham's asking, do you stream daily? Yeah, we're doing this bootcamp daily. Actually, let's look at that here. If you go to badwebsite.club, you'll find the schedule here. We're going to be streaming every day until Wednesday next week. That's when this bootcamp will end. And then on the Friday the 9th, we're going to have a Q&A. And on Monday 11th, I believe, we're going to start the JavaScript bootcamp. And that goes until April. So it's a lot of streaming. That's the link to that. Okay, let's do some questions. I have a question and I would like to ask it, which is what was up with min content? Let's go to MDN real quick. MDN. Let's look at min content. So min content sizing represents the intrinsic minimum width of the content. For text contents, this means that the content will take a soft wrapping opportunities, becoming as small as the longest word. And if you remember, that's how it was. How do I play around with this? Play? Ah, cool. How do I run? Oh, cool. Right. Check it out. So these items are set to have these 2 divs with class item are each set to be as wide as minimum to accommodate the content. Here's item, and then there's item with more text in it. Watch what happens when I remove the min content part. I'll run again. Probably takes a second. I hope. Did it work? I don't know if it worked. Let's do it in the inspector. Oh, no. Never mind. There it is. Look. Now it's wider. Now it takes up the whole row because it's a block. But see, with this min content, we can tell it, hey, please only be as wide as you really, really need to be. As wide as the longest word. Okay. I just want to bring up some other comments. Nikita says, well, after that, is it me or Flexbox seems to now only be good for centering items? That is one very good applicable way of using Flexbox. Remember, I don't know if you remember what I said yesterday or if you saw, somebody asked, like, when should I use which? One of my favorite opinions is when you're dealing with one dimension of content and you really don't need to like mess around too much with the layout, then Flexbox is great because you just say it's a Flexbox, you put the direction and you're good to go. If you've got two-dimensional layouts that are more complicated, then a grid makes a lot more sense. As Sean says, the syntax of Flex still seems easier to wrap around my head, but the power of grid feels really apparent. The raw power. And yeah, you saw that we could do some pretty wild stuff with it. Still, determining when to use media queries, Flexbox, or grid to establish responsiveness seems touch and go. And people will argue about what are the best practices. Best practices get brought up a lot in software development. You might see that for a few years, people are saying one thing, and then a few years later, everyone's like, oh, no, that thing's terrible. You should do the other thing. And then a few years later, everyone's like, oh, no, actually, the best practice is the first thing. they change over time. What I value when I look at a code base is consistency. So you're going to pick one thing, stick with it, is my favorite thing. And as Andre says, grid is shorter for this too. Display grid, place content center. Oh, I want to read this comment by Checkham. I see my page as a house schema. I use grid to build the walls and create rooms and flex to place the furniture inside my rooms. That's such a good way to put it. Thank you. I love that. Okay. So we've done questions. If you all have any more questions, don't worry. You can come to Discord and ask them as well. Link is in that page that I posted. So that's the magazine done. Tomorrow we'll be doing our fourth product certification project, which is the product landing page. So what's going to happen tomorrow is we'll go live same time as usual, which is an hour ago, and I'll be showing how I would approach doing this. I'm not going to show you how to do the whole thing because ideally what you want to do is do these on your own so that you could go so that you can get your certification. The way to get your certification is to do all 5 of the projects. Yeah. So tomorrow we'll do the product landing page. Next week, we've got the Ferris wheel, the penguin, and then the portfolio page, and we're done. Remember, all of this is recorded, so don't worry if you're a bit behind. Okay. Well, that's it for me today. I wish you all the most wonderful rest of your day. Hope you're getting lots of rest. Remember, the other homework is to take it as easy as possible. We're learning a lot, and I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one, everybody. Bye for now.